Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX141Walsh, welcome you to an all new Ace in the Day gameplay for the arcade mode of War Thunder. In today's episode we shall be reviewing the N1K1-Ja, a Japanese fighter aircraft coming to tier 4 and a battle rating of 5.3. For the purposes of today's historical overview, we'll be continuing from where we left off last week from the N1K1-Ja review, link available in the top right corner of your screen as displayed now. Moving on from the floatplane fighter into the land-based fighter development of the N1K. With that, let's begin. The origins of the land-based version of the N1K can be traced back to December of 1941, as 5 months prior to the maiden flight of the N1K1-Ja, the Kawanishi engineering team proposed to their management the idea of developing a land-based version of the floatplane fighter. Kawanishi's management agreed to fund this project as a private venture. The design approach was to reuse the majority of the floatplane design, albeit with two key changes. Firstly, the replacement of the floats with retractable undercarriage, and secondly, the replacement of the Mitsubishi Mk4D Kasei 14 1460 horsepower radial engine with the more powerful Nakajima Hamare 2000 horsepower radial engine. This would drive a new 10-foot 10-inch or 3.3 metre 4-blade propeller. The usage of this propeller and the retention of the original mid-wing layout meant that landing gear legs had to be extended and made telescopic so they could fit into the wing wells. As design work continued through 1942, a unique feature was added to the plane: automatic combat flaps. Whereas flap extension in the Kyofu and most contemporary fighters was done manually by the pilot, the land-based aircraft's flaps would be automatically changing angle in response to the G-forces experienced during manoeuvres. The initial prototype, the Model X1 experimental land-based fighter, flew for the first time on the 27th of December 1942, armed with two 7.7mm Type 97 machine guns as mounted in the nose, and two 20mm Type 99 Model 2 cannon as mounted in underwing gondolas. This initial test flight and subsequent test flights saw mixed results. On the plus side, the plane was very manoeuvrable and showed immense potential. The downside, however, was that the Hamare 11 engine, as used, had entered production before the end of its test program, meaning it still had plenty of issues to resolve. This led to the engine only providing 1820 horsepower, not the promised 2000 horsepower. Additionally, the poor heat treatment of the landing gear wheels led to failures in deploying the landing gear. Whilst the landing gear issue had been resolved by the time the plane entered performance trials with the Imperial Japanese Navy in July of 1943, the engine issues were still ongoing. This meant that the plane only reached a top speed of 357 miles per hour or 574 kilometers an hour in level flight, making the plane faster than the A6M5 Raisin, but slower than the J2M2 Raiden. However, as the plane had a clear advantage over the Raiden in terms of manoeuvrability, and the Imperial Japanese Navy desperately needed aircraft that could counter the United States Navy's F4U Corsairs and F6F Hellcats, the Imperial Japanese Navy agreed to further official development of the fighter under the designation N1K1-Ja Shiden Fighter Interceptor, the J indicating it was a land development of the existing N1K1-Ja. This official acceptance of the design was to accelerate development, starting with the partial resolution of the engine issues which had plagued the plane, leading to the Hamare 21 1990 horsepower radial engine being fitted, accommodated by a modified engine cowling and new lower lip air scoop. Moreover, the was now extended with two additional wing-mounted 20mm Type 99 Model 2 cannon. Entering production as the N1K1-Ja Shiden Model 11, by the closing months of 1943, the plane entered service in early 1944. In service, the plane proved to be capable of holding its own against the Allied contemporaries, only being held back through engine reliability and a wide variety of new issues with the undercarriage. The N1K1-Ja Model 11A subvariant, the plane you're meant to be seeing on screen today, saw the movement of all four 20mm cannon into the wings and the removal of the nose-mounted machine guns, which conflicts with the interpretation that you're seeing in War Thunder, and we could say what we're actually flying today is the base N1K1-Ja variant. The following N1K1-JB and JC subvariants were fighter bomber aircraft, and the N1K1-Ja was succeeded by the N1K2-Ja in the latter half of 1944. And so with our historical overview concluded, let us take a look at how the N1K1-Ja handles in the skies of War Thunder Arcade. Today's gameplay is brought to you from the ground strike map Gorge. For this we'll be using the following setup: stealth belts across the board, the reasoning being that we want to try and surprise our foes with our firepower when using boom and zoom or interception strikes, not giving any tracer away to indicate when our firepower is on its way to our opponent. If you're looking for the most powerful belts to equip, in my experience I'd recommend the stealth belts to the machine guns, and then for the main portion of your firepower, i.e. the 20mm cannon, the tracer belts, or their sole constituent being the high explosive fragmentation tracer shell. Our gun convergence is set to 500 metres, the logic here being that our engagements are going to happen at a whole variety of distances, whether it be up close and personal, in turn fighting, or alternatively at more extreme distances through interception, and I found the 500 metre gun convergence works best to accommodate all these regards. As for our fuel load, we're taking the standard 30-minute fuel load to ensure we can make it to the end of the game unscaled on fuel capacity. We begin our analysis as always then by discussing climb rate, and in the case of the N1K1-Ja, the climb rate of this plane in the long term is extremely powerful, whereas in the short term it's average at best. When I say short term, I mean a plane's ability to gain 1000 metres altitude at a quick rate. That is not going to be afforded to the N1K1-Ja compared to planes such as the Messerschmitt 19G6, which do so in a much better fashion. But in the case of the long-term climb rate, so if you want to go from 2000 metres altitude to an excess of 5000 metres altitude in a single climb as managed over war emergency power, this plane's the one to fly, being able to match practically everything or surpass everything that it will see in or around its battle rating. Only planes that are battle rating of 6.0 upwards, such as the Messerschmitt 19K4 or the Tempest Mark V, will be able to do better. And what you'll find is, if you want to be able to sustain your climb in this plane, you'll need to use a climb angle of 23 degrees rather than 25 degrees, which would be my standard recommendation. That's because when you get to 4,400 metres altitude and you re-engage war emergency power, this plane for some reason starts to decelerate on its war emergency power rather than accelerate, and that will force you to have to level the plane out, build up your speed and start again, so do keep that in mind. But this means you can get into a high altitude perch right at the start of the game and then choose whether you want to confront those who've tried to climb as well, or alternatively, as we're seeing here, going into an interceptor role because there's no competition up on high to deal with. As we come down towards the Dornier 217E2 here, note one key thing however, this plane is not an ideal interceptor. Now we're going to go on about this for a little period of time. The main reason is this is not a fast aircraft at its battle rating. Typically by the time you get to a battle rating of 5.3, planes feel rather quick in general, whether it's in a dive or in a straight line. In the case of the N1K1-Ja, I've actually found this plane to be slow in general when you're trying to pursue foes, or alternatively just build up speed. As we swing over the top of this Messerschmitt 19F4 here, thinking they were going for us originally, but looks as though they've diverted towards our B-17, we'll get revenge, and we could have saved that bomber in the first instance, a misplay on my part. In a straight line, what you'll find is, in isolation, this plane is very good in terms of straight line acceleration, going from its average, by comparison with its competition, stall speed of 150 km/h to 400 km/h on engine power alone at a very good rate. If you add in more emergency power, you'll kick this threshold up to 500 km/h. The difficulty is, however, the vast majority of your competition, barring the likes of the Spitfire LF Mark 9, which find themselves in a similar boat to your own plane, you'll find that these planes have acceleration thresholds that are much higher, either able to get to speeds in excess of 500 km/h on engine power alone before needing to engage for emergency power, and that will cause you significant issues in terms of pursuing aircraft, or alternatively just in terms of racing towards a target when you've got allies on your team who've also gone for altitude in the first instance. This then carries through in terms of dive speed and dive speed acceleration. Your maximum dive speed in this plane is a rather woeful 895 km/h, which falls well behind a lot of planes which push beyond 900 km/h in the first instance, such as the LA9, which we're now trying to dive towards as they go towards our friendly Z1007 bomber, which we're never going to get to in saving time because we do not have that dive speed acceleration. Talking about the acceleration in particular, in this plane it's below average, and that's only to get to 800 km/h. If you want to get to your maximum dive speed, you'll find at 800 km/h, the dive speed acceleration of this plane drops off massively, to the point that it's a real struggle to get to your maximum dive speed unless you're willing to sacrifice 3000 metres altitude to do so. As we come down the LA9, we thought we would have had it made with that initial pass, but unfortunately we didn't, which means we can start to use our advantageous manoeuvrability here versus the LA9 as we avoid the vertical scissors pass in order to swing around and try to get on top of them. And the difficulty is, they've realised very quickly they do not have the manoeuvrability in the Turnfight to beat us, so they instead go into a high speed dive, and they're going to use the energy they've just gained in order to yo-yo up towards us, i.e. come back off the rebound. And as they zoom up towards us, we recognise this, we've already been getting ready to counter it. We do not have a strong short-term climb rate or sprinting climb rate as them, and instead we're going to use our manoeuvrability, particularly on our rudder, to hang it over the top of them and frustrate their aim, whereby their 423mm cannon are not going to hit our aircraft, coming just short underneath the tail section. And as they start to head towards a stall, they recognise the fact we have the superior manoeuvrability and are trying to hammerhead over the top of them, so they've already gone into a split test and started to dive. And once we score a couple more hits, we're going to have to call this engagement a draw. We're neither able to get a shot on them, nor have they been able to get a shot on us, and we cannot continue pursuit. And that's because once you start going into the dive and you come out the dive into a straight line situation, the straight line energy retention of the N1K1-Ja is the same as in terms of its dive speed acceleration and maximum dive speed. It's woeful compared to the competition, in that you're only able to start retaining speed at 545 km an hour, whereas in the case of the LA9, if I remember correctly, they start retaining their speed in the region of 600 km an hour, meaning that we'd be left behind. And by going down to lower altitude as well, we start to enter a world of potential furballs. And if we get caught up in a furball because we lack the overall speed to get away, it means that once we're in the furball, we're in it until it ends, i.e. our team will gain the advantage, or alternatively, we get shot down. So instead, we stay up on height and go towards this door near 217. And note the reason we're able to close the distance so nicely and pick up the critical hit is because they did not react to us until it was too late. If they reacted much earlier, we'd not have dived on them to such an extent to try and hit the target. And now we surge up towards the Focke 490 Anton. So thus far I've really slated this plane in terms of its overall speed, stating it's a slow aircraft, but where do the advantages come in then? Well, that's when you get up close and personal with opponents, and you're going to see this against the Anton in a regard that's perhaps not anticipated, and that is the ability for this plane to follow foes in the vertical. And this Anton, for all intents and purposes, may not be aware of our incoming presence till it's too late. Alternatively, what they may be trying to do is stay over the top of us and use their position in the sky to frustrate us. But the nice thing about the N1K1-Ja is its ability to use its raw engine power in order to follow foes in the vertical. And this not only applies in terms of following climbing foes, but also in terms of vertical spiral situations, where you're following a foe on their 6 and they're trying to use the vertical spiral to shake you off by forcing you to stall out. This plane will be one of the very last to hit its stall speed, as whilst the stall speed is average, as already mentioned, it does not decelerate towards its stall speed as rapidly as say a Focke 490 A8. And this means that you're able to follow foes for an extended period of time and cause them to pretty much get scared because they just get suddenly caught by surprise in the fact that, Jesus, that N1K1-Ja is just following me constantly. And then when we go into a Turnfight, that's where this plane works to its best. In terms of turn circle, it has the best turn circle it's battle rating, only being closely matched by the Spitfire LF Mark 9, which falls slightly behind. You'll have to go to a battle rating of 6.0 with a Messerschmitt 19K4 to find a plane that's able to turn as tightly, where the K4 relies on its rudder in order to tighten its turn circle as tightly as this aircraft. In terms of roll rate, you've got a great roll rate so long as you keep this plane to lower speeds, where you'll be able to change directionality on the fly with relative ease. In regards to the rudder, you've got a very powerful rudder, comparable to the J2 M3, with the ability to flat rudder turn this plane very tightly and also conduct hammerheads, as we previously seen very nicely in this plane. The only weak control surface on this aircraft, by comparison, is the elevator, which is rather heavy in its initial response, but when it gets going, it can be very strong in the horizontal turn. I would not advise conducting loops too frequently in this plane, however, as the elevator struggles in a loop in general unless you start the loop at a speed of say 400 km an hour or in excess of that, and this will cause you to bleed a lot of speed in the vertical, as we did see in particular with the LA9 earlier on. So avoid loops but keep everything else in the horizontal and you're going to have a whale of a time in terms of turn fighting. At higher speeds, however, the control surfaces begin to fall away, particularly in terms of your roll rate and your rudder. From 550 to 750 km an hour, you'll find that you'll lose 75% of your roll rate, meaning that boom and zoom attacks in this aircraft are rather difficult to pinpoint in terms of following foes. This is added to by the fact between 600 and 700 km an hour, you will lose 50% of your rudder's responsiveness, so you lose the ability to follow foes and to apply pinpoint precision in aiming at a foe in a boom and zoom dive. So you can see the theme here, boom and zoom is not going to be your strongest suit. Then add to that the fact between 600 and 700 km an hour, you'll lose 25% of your elevator responsiveness, and if a foe decides at last minute to go head to head with you in the vertical, or you're coming down them and they've cut up towards you, even if you're able to eliminate them, there's a very high chance you may end up smashing into the wreck if you get too close. And again, that's something that's happened to me a number of times. As we swing down towards the Messerschmitt 19 here, but note they're already reacting to our incoming presence, and we're already building up to in excess of 700 km an hour, and we're afraid of losing our control responsiveness and not being able to follow the target, which is why we're breaking back up, getting ready to potentially strike the Focke 490 that spawned in and heading our way. So you can see why I'm being hesitant here for a good period of time to conduct boom and zoom, because we lack the overall speed to get us out of a situation if we're lured into a furball, and we lack the controllability in order to be able to follow foes in a high speed dive. So in return, what we have to try and do is cause our foes to head up towards us, either using our bombers as a lure, or alternatively putting ourselves in a potential position where we look as though we're stalling out. But instead, the Focke 490 A5 makes the mistake of following us, hits the stall, we swing around and rip them apart, and we can rinse and repeat this. which is why one of the aspects of this plane is you can end up loitering around the enemy spawn for an extended period of time, simply because you're not in a position where you can comfortably fly away from the spawn, going into a boom and zoom dive, head out towards the fringe of the map, gain altitude and then head back over. Instead it feels as though you have to take positional control of the map, i.e. lock down a certain region, and over the course of this game we've been locking down near the enemy spawn the fact that we're not allowing any enemy bombers to level bomb, i.e. just fly along and attack our bases. They'll have to dive to do so or attack our ground units, and on top of that prevent enemy climbers. And that's one of the tactics that works very well I've found in this plane, and if opponents get to a level altitude position, that's when you can go into your standard 1 versus 1 turnfight, as we pick up a critical hit and cause a fire on the PE-8, now breaking through into our boom and zoom potential. We snap back up at this point, noting that all the targets down at low altitude have actually been eliminated, the majority of the outstanding targets being towards the enemy spawn or having just spawned in. And the last aspects that we need to really talk about this aircraft in terms of stall recovery. This plane has a very strong stall recovery where you'll find that it's smooth and you only need to get the plane up to 190 km an hour before you're able to retain control of the control surfaces once more. Outside of that, the other items to note is there's no real ideal altitude range in this aircraft, and I would say it's anywhere between ground level and 6,000 metres altitude, because the maximum altitude thresholds on engine power is 7,500 metres altitude, where you'll find that you'll start to lose your engine performance to a degree. And in terms of control surfaces, it's 6,250 metres altitude, and you see a drop off in performance across all 3 control surface domains. That's not too much of a handicap, as you're going to see limited engagements above 6,000 metres altitude typically, or your ability to confront foes before you get to 6,000 metres altitude plus, or your long-term climb rate as referenced early on. Here we swing down the Focke 190 Dora and are able to cut them apart for our final kill of the game, our 8th kill, as we cut our momentum through here and decide to head back towards friendly skies. The game practically ascend and the tickets are going to expire shortly. We would have snapped round towards the Messerschmitt 19, but we've got additional planes coming in from the enemy spawn, and that furball's too close to the enemy spawn for us to escape if the situation becomes adverse. And as we look towards the enemy Year 2 here, the game ends and it's time for us to take a look at the post-game stats. With our 8 kills, we're able to pick up 27,793 Silver Lions and 2,922 research points. To defeat the N1K1-Ja in a given matchup, I would recommend exploiting the core weakness of this aircraft, and that is its lack of pace. Where it being a straight line or alternatively in the dive, this is a slow aircraft compared to its batter rating contemporaries. And when you have this foe trying to pursue you, what you'll find is if you can keep your speed above 500 km an hour, and if the plane's coming from above, use a dive to build up your speed and neutralise the N1K1 pilot's advantage, you'll quickly find they start to fall behind in your wake and they'll get frustrated, causing them to turn around and go and attack one of your allies unless they wish to pursue you at arm's length for the entirety of the match. And as they become embroiled in engagement with one of your allies, this is the time to come around and strike, using boom and zoom or an interception style pass to rip them out the sky before they can cause any more damage to your teammates. But by avoiding such circumstances in our own N1K1-Ja today, hopefully we've demonstrated that this is a fighter in the first instance, a very powerful one for turn fighting that can double up as an interceptor in a given regard, i.e. when you get to that high altitude perch at the start of the game, thanks to the long-term climb rate of this aircraft, and there's no fighter opposition up on high for this plane to go toe-to-toe with. It'll be at the enemy team's loss, as you can switch into that interceptor role and start to dispatch the enemy bombers, while this plane has ample firepower in the form of the forged 20mm cannon, only being held back by the limited ammo capacity, 100 rounds per cannon or 400 rounds in total. You also have some boom and zoom potential, albeit for a distance in the vertical of 1,750 metres altitude, being able to retain your energy well in this regard, but do not see this plane as a dedicated boom and zoom aircraft or its poor high speed control. It works best within the ideal speed range of 375 to 475 km an hour, and at lower speeds as well in the turn fight as speeds drop, or of its fantastic horizontal energy retention and great engine output. And one final note to make is that I personally found the stock grind of this plane to be absolutely painless. Of course you have the disadvantage when stock of not having the overall engine performance, but in terms of climb rate, the climb rate of this aircraft at 23 degrees, as mentioned at the start of this review, was highly sustainable and meant that I could creep off to the side of the map, gain a lot of altitude and wreak havoc as a fighter stroke backup interceptor as needed, as seen today when this plane is fully upgraded. And if you leave this plane untouched up on high in the sky, the weather forecast is not going to be good for your team because it will be a forecast of violet lightning. And so I've been TX141, and if you have enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future War Thunder videos on my channel. But until next time, as always ladies and gentlemen, take care and good luck in the skies.